Masechet Nazir Daf Mem Vav. We're going through the procedure for Tiglachat Tahara. We began it in the previous Mishnah, and now we're continuing a Nazir who completed successfully his period of Nazirut. What does he do at the end of the Nazirut? So here our Mishnah teaches Hayam Vashelat Shilamim or Sholkan. So you take the Shilamim offering and you would boil it, or sholek. Sholek is another type of cooking. Some say overcooking or undercooking, some kind of boiling or roasting with a lot of liquid. HaKohen notel et hazeroa b'shela min ha'ayil v'chala masa achat min hasal urkik masa achat v'noten al kapeh nazir umenifan. And so the Kohen will take the foreleg of the ram that was cooked. After it's cooked, he takes the foreleg, and he's also going to take one chala masa, something unleavened, one masa, and also another one that is a wafer. It's cooked a little bit differently. And he's going to put all of that on the palms of the Nazir, and he waves them, right? Like we do with the lulav, the way we wave it. The lulav is actually based on this tenufa. This is not the only. There are many korbanot that we do tenufa. Once he does the tenufa, then that permits the Nazir to go ahead and drink wine, and he can become tameh lamet. Rabbi Shimon Omer, כיוון שנזרק עליו אחד מן הדמים, הותר הנזיר לשתות ביין ולהיטמא למתים. Rabbi Shimon, however, disagrees. He's more lenient and says, no, you don't have to wait for the tenufa. Once you take the blood of one of the offerings, whichever one you do first, and you sprinkle that blood on the mizbeach, then that makes that first korban official. The sprinkling of the blood is the main thing that completes the offering procedure. So once he does the first one, then the Nazir can go ahead and he can drink wine and he can become tameh lamet, and he doesn't have to wait till all the way at the end when he does the korban, when he does the tenufa, the waving. All right, that's the Mishnah. We saw two opinions. We're going to see now a Braita that also has the same two opinions, but in different names. So, Tenor Banan, V'achar ishte hanazir yayin, achar ha'ma'asim kulam, dibre Rabbi Eliezer. Rabbi Eliezer in this Baraita is the same as the Chachamim up here, who says that you have to do all of the procedure, and the waving is the last part of it, and only then can he go and drink wine. Chachamim omerim achar ma'aseh yechidi. Chachamim, however, say, no, just after the first item, meaning the sprinkling of one of the sacrifices. So Chachamim is parallel to Rabbi Shimon. Okay, now we're going to see the source for Chachamim. The opinion of Rabbi Eliezer is pretty clear. We can actually look at the Pesukim now, and you see it says here that this is after he shaves his head and he puts his hair under the shilamim. That's what we talked about last time. And then he takes that shilamim and he cooks it. And once it's cooked and boiled, he takes the velakacha kohen et hazeroa b'shela. He takes that shoulder and he takes chalat masa achat uminasal urkik masa echad, and takes these two loaves. V'natan al kapeh nazir acharit kalecho et nizro, and he puts them on the palms of the Nazir after he had shaved. So the order is shaving. That's what we saw over here in Pasuk 18. And now this is the cooking of the and taking of the shoulder and putting it on his hands, and then behenifotam, and then he waves it, right? So the order is going to be that he shaves first, and then he waves it. Hatenufa lifnei Adonai kodesh ulakohen al chazeh tenufa shokatrima v'achar yishte nazir yayin, and after that says ve'achar. Notice it says achar here, right? So he has to do the waving after the shaving. And here it says he has to, after he does the waving, then he can drink wine. So it seems pretty clear from the simple reading of the Pesukim that he's going to have to, he already did one of the korbanot because, right, that's what we talked about before. And he does the shaving. He puts the hair under the fire. So shaving, waving, and only then. That's the very last thing, right? Then is the conclusion. Zot Torat HaNazir. So the last thing, after he finishes everything, then he can go ahead and drink wine and also become Tameh Lamet. So that seems the simple reading. Is in fact like Rabbi Eliezer. You have to do the whole thing. Wait till the end. You have to do the waving too, and then you can shaving and waving, and only then you can drink wine. So we're going to ask about Chachamim. What do you mean? You can start drinking wine, the Nazir, even after just one thing, after he just sprinkles the blood of one of the sacrifices. Mai tamahu d'Rabbanan. How does he read that into the Pisukim? And the answer is Ketiv hachad yishteh hayayin Nazir uchtiv hatam hachad itkalecho et nizro ma hatam achal maaseh yichidi afkan achal maaseh yichidi. So just like in that second to last pasuk 19, it says after he shaves. So that's talking about after one thing, meaning after shaving. Let's look at the pasuk here. When do you do the waving? After shaving. And so the word achad here means after this one important item that you have to do, shaving and then waving. So we learned also that the word ve'achad here as a gezerah shava, that the achad here does not mean after everything that came before, but rather after one important item. And so when is that? It means after sprinkling of the blood of one of the korbanot, then he can already drink wine. And so you have to read this out of order. This achad and achad parallel is telling you that the drinking wine is not necessarily in this order all the way at the end. It can even be beforehand. So that's the reason for Rabbanan. Now we ask about that. Ema adiika tarvaihu. Wait, maybe this achad is building on the other achad, and has to be after you did the shaving and the waving, all the way at the end. Then only then you can drink wine. So we answer, no, ihachi gezerah shava lamalid. Then what would the gezerah shava come to teach? From the form of achad, and then achad, that parallelism, that word repeating itself, comes to tell us that read the last achad in the context of the achad beforehand, and just like the achad beforehand is after one thing, so to this achad is after only one thing. And no, you don't have to wait all the way until the end. Okay, so that's the source for the machloket. So we have Rabbi Eliezer says, oh, you have to do everything. And Chachamim say, no, you just have to do one thing. Now, Amar Rav, the following, we're going to have a statement of Rav, Tenufa ben Nazir me'akevet, that you must do the waving. And it's an absolutely necessary part. The Nazir is not over. Nazirut is not over. He cannot drink wine until he does the waving. He has to do the waving. Okay. Rav said this, and now we're going to have a discussion in two versions. Here's version number one. Alibad deman, ilem alibad rabbanan tiglachat amri rabbanan la me'akeva tenufa mibaya. If it's Rav, when he says you have to do the waving, according to whom, right? Whose opinion is he following? If he's following Rabbanan said that he doesn't even need to shave. All he has to do is offer one sacrifice, sprinkle the blood. Even before he shaved, he can already drink the wine. Of course, he's supposed to do all the rest of the things, but the point is that those do not preclude drinking wine. So if he says that he doesn't even have to shave, and the shaving is an essential part, seems more essential than waving. Waving in general, for other korbanot, where you have to do waving, it's a misvat aseh. But if you don't do the waving, it doesn't nullify the korban. You still get atonement even if you don't do the waving. So waving in general is usually not essential. And the tiglachat, which is done right on his body, seems to be more essential. So if Rabbanan say he doesn't have to do shaving, certainly they would say he does not have to do the waving, and he can drink wine just after sprinkling one blood. And so therefore Rav can't be talking about Rabbanan when he says the waving is essential. Ela alibad Rabbi Eliezer, must be according to Rabbi Eliezer. So wait, Peshita Hamar Rabbi Eliezer Harmasim Kulam. Wait, that would be too simple. Rabbi Eliezer, obvious. Rabbi Eliezer says you have to do the whole procedure and after everything. And so, and wouldn't that be obvious that of course you have to do the shaving and the waving? Why would Rav even need to say it? If he was explaining him explaining the law according to the Rabbi Eliezer. And the answer is, because I would have thought regarding atonement, when you have to do waving for other korbanot that require waving, we consider the waving just a peripheral aspect of the mitzvah. It's a side point, it's a side dish, but it's not necessary for atonement if you didn't have atonement. So here also, we should say that it's not absolutely necessary. We might think that it's not absolutely necessary to do the waving, and that's why Rav comes to teach me that no, don't think that. According to the Rabbi Eliezer, the waving is absolutely necessary, and so in fact the Rabbi Eliezer can be the source that Rav is explaining. In a couple of minutes, we're going to see another version of this, in which we explain that Rav actually is following the Rabbanan, and still he's saying yes, tenufa is necessary even according to Rabbanan. Okay, but first we have to clarify a few more things. Umi me'akeva, does waving really preclude his ability to drink wine? Would anyone say that? zot Torat HaNazir ben sheyesh lo kapayim ben she'en lo kapayim. We have a baraita that teaches this is the law for the Nazir, and the Nazir with the he yedi'ah is an inclusive word, and comes to include whether he has palms or whether he does not have palms. If the Nazir happens to be a double amputee and has no hands, nevertheless, this is the law, and even though he cannot wave because he doesn't have palms to hold it, that's okay. He can still be a Nazir, and he can still do everything else. It seems from here that the waving is not essential, right? Because if he doesn't have palms, and he can't do it, and therefore he doesn't have to do it. So it seems that it's not essential. So Rav, why'd you say that it is essential, and within the context of Rabbi Eliezer, even though he says you have to do everything, but waving should not be essential according to Rav in the context of Rabbi Eliezer. Ve'ela hadetanya. So now we're going to refute this. No, it's not true. Zot Torat HaNazir ben sheyesh lo se'ar ben she'en lo se'ar hachi nameh de la me'akeba. There's another baraita that says this is the law of the Nazir, whether he has hair or whether he has no hair. What if a Nazir is bald? His hair doesn't grow at all. So then what are we going to do? Oh, he's still a Nazir and he does everything else, and that's fine. So are you going to say over here also that a Nazir doesn't have to shave? Within the context again of Rabbi Eliezer. Rabbi Eliezer says he has to shave. He has to do everything. And so you wouldn't say that. Nazir memorat bet Shammai omrim eno sarich lehabir ta'ar al rosho, ubet Hillel omrim sarich lehabir ta'ar al rosho. After all, we have another baraita that's going to clarify what he does when he's bald. A Nazir who is bald, well, it's a machloket. The Bet Shammai says he doesn't have to do anything. He doesn't even have to pass a razor on his head. And Bet Hillel says he has to at least pass a razor on his head, even though there's no hair and it's not going to cut anything. Nevertheless, he has to just go through the motion and pass it over his head. Now let's explain this baraita, because what happens with this Nazir? Does it count or does it not count? V'amar Rabbeinu mai eno sarich lebet Shammai eno sarich en lo takana halebet Hillel yesh lo takana. So when Bet Shammai says he doesn't have to pass a razor over his head, when he said doesn't have to, it means that it doesn't help, and he cannot have any remedy. He can't get out of a Nazirut, even if he's a Nazir for 30 days. But in order to finish his Nazirut, he has to cut his hair, and he's bald, so he has no hair. Then he can never stop, because even if he just passes a razor over, if he's not actually cutting hair, it doesn't conclude his Nazirut. Sorry, you have to be a Nazir forever, according to Bet Shammai. But Bet Hillel, who says, just pass it over, right? And, right, we'll cut as much as we can. He has no hair? Okay, so at least we did what we could. And that's sufficient. So what you see here is that according to Bet Hillel, even when if we read that back into this baraita, so it says whether he has or doesn't have hair, still Zot Torat HaNazir. That means that it is ma'akev. You have to do shaving. Okay, if he doesn't have hair, we're still going to do a shaving act with a razor, passing it over his head. You do the ceremony, whether it cuts or not. You do your best. But it is necessary to do that. And so if that's true here, now we have a better understanding. We can read that interpretation back into the guy with no hands. If he has no hands, then he still does have to do a waving in some way. If he has four, put it on his forearms, right? You do something, and so that you can fulfill the waving, but you have to fulfill the waving. It is in fact necessary. And so this answers the question, yes, waving is necessary, shaving is necessary. If you can't do it in the normal way, you do something, but it still is necessary. And so Rav is explained well within the context of Rabbi Eliezer. Okay, now, side point, V'hainu de Rabbi Pedat. This interpretation that you had of Bet Shammai will accord with what Rabbi Pedat said. Amar Rabbi Pedat, Bet Shammai v'Rabbi Eliezer amiru devar echad. Rabbi Pedat noticed that the logic that Bet Shammai said above, that if he has no hair, sorry Charlie, you can't end your nizirut. Rabbi Eliezer said something similar. When did he say that? My Rabbi Eliezer, Tetanya, en lo bohen yad veregel, en lo tahara olamit, ibre Rabbi Eliezer. Here we're talking about a misorah. As part of his concluding ceremony, the Kohen has to take the blood and put it on his right thumb and right big toe. And what happens if this misorah does not have a thumb or a big toe? And sorry, you can't put the blood on it. You can't conclude your misorah, and therefore he's going to be tameh misorah forever. That's the opinion of Rabbi Eliezer. So you see how that matches up. And both Bet Shammai and Rabbi Eliezer, who incidentally, both of them often record the older layer of halacha, and so the older the older layer of tradition, and so both of them agree that you have to do a ceremony exactly as is recorded in the Torah, and if you can't do it exactly, then you lost your chance. You can't do anything at all. Whereas Rabbi Shimon Omer, Yanichenu al mekomo v'yeseh. Rabbi Shimon says you put it on wherever you can. If he's missing a thumb, so you put it on his hand. If he's missing a hand, you put it on the stump of his wrist, or you put it wherever you can. Hachamim omerim yaniach al shel semol v'yeseh. Hachamim say you put it on his left. If he doesn't have a right thumb, so you put it on his left thumb. Right? They're both saying you do the second best, whatever you can, but you do have to do it and you do fulfill. Whereas Bet Shammai says if you can't do it the right way, then you can't do it at all, and that is the same. Rabbi Eliezer said that, and that's the same logic as Bet Shammai. Now that we've finished one version of the discussion, here's the second one. Lishana harina amari la amar Rav tenufa ben Nazir me'akevet. Here's another version of the analysis. The same statement of Rav. He says that the waving is absolutely necessary for a Nazir to be able to conclude and start drinking wine. And we ask, Ali Bademan, who is Rav following when he says the statement? Who is he trying to clarify? It can't be Rabbi Eliezer, because that would be obvious. Rabbi Eliezer says you have to do all of the whole procedure, and only at the end he can drink wine. So that would be after the waving, after the haircut, after the waving. So Rav would not have to say it according to the Rabbi Eliezer. Ela alibad Rabbanan. So rather, it has to be according to Rabbanan. And we ask, Hashta yesh loma tiglachat amri Rabbanan la makeba tinuva mibaya. But how could it be Rabbanan? They say that even taking a haircut, even shaving, is not necessary for the Nazir to go ahead and drink wine. And if it's not necessary to take a haircut, all the more so, it would not be necessary to do the wave offering, which generally is something that b'diavad, if you don't do, it's still okay. So we ask, Umi lo la me'akeva. Wait a second, is that true? That waving is not necessary? V'hatanya. Zo Torat HaNazir ben sheyesh lo kapayim ben she'en lo kapayim. Regarding Nazir, there's a braita that says if he has no hands, doesn't matter. He still has to do the waving, and so we see that waving is in fact necessary. So that's right. Even though regarding other korbanot, maybe waving is not necessary, but even though Rabbanan say Shaving is not necessary for him to end, but the Rabbanan would say, so even though they say shaving is not necessary, waving is necessary. All right, for a Nazir, and that's what this Baraita teaches. Okay, so that's a good answer. So Rav is following Rabbanan and saying, according to Rabbanan, I know they just told you that all he has to do is do a sprinkling of the blood of one of the korbanot, but he also has to do waving, right? He has to do those things. Even though he doesn't have to do shaving, he has to wave. And that's what Rav was coming to tell us, according to Rabbanan. So that's a good answer. Now we're going to ask, ואלא הדתניא זאת תורת הנזיר בין שיש לו שיער בין שאין לו שיער הכי נמי דמעכבה. But look at this baraita that has the same form as the previous one. And it said in the same pasuk, this is the law of the Nazir. What's the Nazir coming to include? Whether he has hair or whether he does not have hair. So now you're going to say the same thing, that, oh, look, it says whether he has hair or not, this is the law of the Nazir. So that means that he has to take a haircut. So you're going to say the same thing, just like you read it in here, that he has to do the waving. So too, he has to take a haircut. And this is all going to be for Rabbanan. V'atanya, Nazir memorad, Bet Shammai omrim eno sarich lavir tar al rosho, u'bet Hillel omrim sarich. Amar Rabbi Avina, my sarich lebet Hillel, sarich ve'en lo takana. And to explain this, this baraita, we cite yet another one that says a Nazir who is bald, Bet Shammai says that he does not have to pass a razor over his head. Bet Hillel says he does need to pass a razor over his head. And this is the key difference here. We're going to give a different explanation of what that means, eno sarich and sarich. Rabbi Abina says, when it says, according to Bet Hillel, sarich means that he has to cut his hair, and since he has no hair, he has no remedy, and he can never drink wine. It's the opposite of the interpretation we said before, right? It's a bit ambiguous when it says he doesn't need to. Does that mean he doesn't need to and he's okay? Or he doesn't need to and he can't and he's not okay? So before we said that according to Bet Shammai, eno sarich means he is no point in putting a razor over his head because he can't fulfill. And before we said Bet Hillel says, just pass a razor over his bald head and that's okay. But now we're interpreting it the opposite way. Bet Hillel says he needs to shave his hair and he has no hair, so sorry, he is a Nazir forever. What we see from this baraita is that whenever we have this pasuk, Zotrat Nazir, and we say, whether he has it or not, according to Bet Hillel, it is necessary. Now, this baraita, it must be according to follow the opinion of Rabbi Eliezer, because only Rabbi Eliezer says he needs to shave, whereas Rabbanan says he does not need to shave. He just has to bring one thing, and that was the korban. But nevertheless, even though this baraita is probably according to Rabbi Eliezer, we're learning from the methodology of this baraita back to this one that says whether he has hands or not, it is necessary. And so this means that yes, it's necessary to bring to do the wave offering. And this baraita can be according to Rabbanan, and that's why Rav is saying that even though Rabbanan said you need one thing, and one thing meant sprinkling of the blood, but they're adding also that one thing includes, if you're bringing a shilamim, you have to do the whole ceremony of that shilamim offering, and you have to take that shank bone, and you're going to have to put it on the bread, and you're going to have to wave it. And it is a necessary part, according to Rabbanan. So Rav is probably not saying that according to Rabbanan you have to shave also. Even though these two baraitot are brought back to back, it doesn't mean that both of them would be according to Rabbanan, because if you interpret it that way, then that would mean that according to Rabbanan you have to do the waving and the shaving, and then that's everything, and there will be no difference between Rabbanan and Rabbi Eliezer. So therefore, we can say that the second baraita is in fact Rabbi Eliezer, and the first one is Rabbanan. And so yes, in Rav's interpretation, according to Rabbanan, you have to do the waving as well. Okay, now last point about this: the Bet Shammai yesh lo takana upeliga de Rabbi Pedat. The way Rabbi Avina explained this baraita in this version is that according to Bet Shammai, eno sarich, you don't have to bother, since he's bald, naturally bald, his hair doesn't grow. Therefore, he is exempt from doing the he's exempt from shaving. Right, and he does have a remedy. Okay, so you can't do that. That's all right. So you do your best, and you don't have to shave off any hair. And according to this interpretation, this would be against what Rabbi Padat said, because Rabbi Padat, if you remember up above, he tried to say that there was an equivalence between Rabbi Eliezer, Rabbi Bet Shammai, and Rabbi Eliezer regarding a Mesorah who has no thumb or has no toe, big toe. So Rabbi Eliezer says he can't do it forever, and Rabbi Padat said that was the same as Bet Shammai, that if he has no hands, he can't do. He has no hair. He's bald. He can't undo. He can't get out of his nizirut. But according to this interpreter, Bet Shammai, here Bet Shammai says if he's bald, that's okay. He doesn't have to shave off any hair. And so that would be the opposite of Rabbi Eliezer. In fact, the Bet Shammai the second reading would be more like Rabbi Shimon or Chachamim, that you do your best, you do something. But yes, there is a remedy to it. All right, and the last Mishnah for the staff. Gileach el ala zebach v'nimsa pasul tiglachto pesula uzbachav lo alu lo. If someone, a Nazir, he brought a zebach, any one of the 3 korbanot that he needs to bring, and then he shaved after that one sacrifice, right? That's what we saw before, that there was a machloket, which one is ideal to bring first and shave after that. But b'di'avad, no matter which one he brought first and he shaved after that one, that's okay. Here's the problem. If it turns out that it was pasul, if he did the shechita and then he's taking the blood, and let's say the blood spills on the floor or becomes tameh, and now this sacrifice that he brought is no good, and yet he already shaved, right? He did he did the shechita and then he shaved, and then turns out after he shaves that something went wrong and the sacrifice is no good. So if so, then that shaving is also no good, and the rest of the korbanot that he brings are also no good. What's the reason for all this? Well, because shaving is only valid if it's done after one proper sacrifice. Because it turns out that one sacrifice that he did first was no good, that means he shaved improperly. Shaving improperly in the middle of Nazirut now he's not a candidate to bring his korbanot, because he has to wait 30 days till he can grow more hair so that he can shave. Since he's not a candidate to bring the rest of the korbanot, the first one was already pasul. The next ones that he brings do not count for anything. He's going to have to wait 30 days to do the whole thing over again. All right, so that's the problem. Better for a Nazir to hold on. Wait till you confirm that the first korban that you brought was all good, and then only then shave, and then he can bring the other ones. Okay, now that's the general rule. Now we're going to bring a couple of specific examples. Kelech ala chatat shelo lishma. ואחר כך בקורבנותיו לשמן, תגלחתו פסולה, וזבחיו לא עלו לו. If the Nazir first brought a korban hatat, and then he shaved, but it turns out that when the Kohen brought the korban hatat, he had wrong intention. He had intention that the hatat would be an olah, and that's no good. A hatat you have to have proper intention and know exactly what it is, which type of korban it is, and why you're bringing it. And so now it turns out that this hatat was no good. And after that, so he brought the hatat, he shaved, but the hatat was no good. After that, he brought the other korbanot, the shalamim and the olah, and he did those properly. Nevertheless, the shaving is no good, and therefore all of his korbanot are no good. Again, the same reason, because he shaved without essentially without having brought a korban, because the chatat was no good. So now he shaved before bringing any proper korbanot, so that shaving is in violation of his nazirut, and so now he's not in a state when he can bring any sacrifices. He's got to wait 30 days. Okay, next case. Gileach al ha'ola ola shelemim shelo lishman v'achar kach bi korbanotав lishman tiglachato pesula uzbachav lo alu lo. Similarly, if he shaved after bringing the olah or the shelamim, and he brought them for shelo lishman. Now, olah and shelamim, if you bring it thinking that it's something else, some other kind of korban, you thought the olah was a shelamim, or thought the shelamim was an olah, and then he brought the other ones, and they were lishma. So again, the haircut, the shaving is no good, because he shaved after that first olah, but since it turns out the olah was not lishma, and so now when you bring a olah, shelamim, shelo lishma, even though the sacrifice itself can continue to be sacrificed, uzvachav lo alulo, it doesn't count for a nazir. If one brings a shelamim, having in mind that it'll be something else, it'll be a regular shelamim, but it will not fulfill the vow or the obligation that caused him to bring it in the first place. So even though this olah or shelamim, you can go ahead and finish the process, but it doesn't count as for his nazirut, because he shaved after a sacrifice that was just a stam sacrifice. It becomes like a voluntary offering, and not for a nazir sacrifice. Therefore, that shaving was not part of a concluding ceremony. It was a shaving that was improper, illegal, and now he has to wait 30 days, and so the whole thing is finished. Okay, so in fact, we have 3 different clauses, and the law is the same for all of them, but the reason why we separate the last one into a separate clause is because that is subject to machloket. Rabbi Shimon omer, oto hazebach lo ala lo, aval sha'ar zevachim alu. Rabbi Shimon says, yes, while that korban, let's say, brought a shelamim first, and he had the wrong intention for that shelamim, thinking it was something else, so it will not count for his nizirut, but the others do count. We're going to explain the Bishimon in a second in the Gemara. So according to the Bishimon, you brought a shelamim with wrong intention and then took a haircut. Don't worry, that haircut can still be based on that korban, even though the korban does not count for nazirut. It's okay. The shaving is still a valid shaving. And then he brings the other 2, and he brings another shelamim for nazirut, and that's okay. So that's what Bishimon disagrees with Tanakama. Tanakama says, no, even though the shelamim becomes a valid stam shelamim, but it's not for nazirut, so he shaved without any nazir specific korban, so it's no good. Rabbi Shimon says if he shaves even after a non-specific korban, it's still okay, as long as he brought something before he shaved. Now, back to everyone's opinion. If he shaved after any one of these, after all 3, and at least one of them was okay, then the shaving is fine. In other words, if he brought all 3 korbanot and shaved after all 3 korbanot, and then turns out, when after they replayed the tape, turns out that one of the ones that he brought was no good. Well, okay, but so he'll have to make up that one that was no good. But the shaving is okay, because the shaving came after at least one proper Nazir sacrifice. That's all you need. Anyone that's a proper Nazir sacrifice. He shaves after that. That's okay. And so it turns out one of the 3 was no good, or even 2 of the 3 was no good. Okay, so make up those sacrifices, but he did the shaving in proper order, and so he doesn't have to shave again, and he can just go on with the makeups. All right, now let's explain here to Bishimon. Amar Ravada bar Hava zot omeret kasaba Rabbi Shimon nazir shigelech al shamen dava yasa. We can see from here that according to the Bishimon, if a nazir shaves after bringing a voluntary shelamim, that's valid. I mean, you're supposed to bring one of the korbanot for a nazir, but if he didn't, that's okay. And that's what happens here. Because he brought the shelamim, he wanted to bring it for a nazir, but the kohen messed up and had intention for something else, so that becomes a shalmei nedava, and that is sufficient to prep him to shave. My ta'ama damar kerav v'natan ala esh asher tachat zebach hashelamim v'la katab al shelamav. And this, the source of this is the pasuk says he's going to put he's going to put it on the fire which is his hair. He's going to put the hair on the fire, which is under the Zevach HaShelamim, the sacrifice of the Shelamim. It doesn't say Shelamav, it doesn't say for his Shelamim offering, but and if it said Shelamav, it would mean the specific one that he's bringing as a Nazir. But it doesn't say Shelamav, it says Shelamim, which is more generic. And generic term means that even if it's just a regular Shelamim, Shelamim Nedava, as long as there was a Shelamim there and he cut his hair after that, then that is sufficient according to the Bishimon. Baruch Adonai Leolam, Amen ve'amen.